Well, everybody wants changes, and there's certainly a lot of changes that could be made, but let's be honest, how many changes really are going to be made? Well, there's one pretty big one, pretty obvious one that everybody's already been talking about, but I think we should talk about it here on the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, welcome to Tuesday. It's the Morning Pitt here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website right there below. That's not a link. Don't click it. It's just an image. But you can follow those letters, Panther-Lair.com, and type them into your web browser and visit the website for the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to talk to other Pitt fans. As you can imagine, the Pitt fans have had a lot to say in the last few days, in the last few weeks, and basically all season since that Cincinnati game, and maybe even dating back to the Wofford game, the concerns started mounting. Certainly they hit a real stride with Cincinnati, and it's only gotten worse since then, but a lot of activity on the boards, which is always good. I like it when the Pitt fans have something to talk about, but it's certainly better when they have success to talk about as opposed to what we've seen here over the last few weeks. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, to never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. These Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Our weekly live show that we'll do tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett will talk a little Pitt sports with you in the off week. And then our post-game show, obviously we won't have one on Saturday, but we'll have one next week after the Louisville game, which is kicking off at 6:30 p.m. It's late, but you know what? It's better than 8 o'clock. Right, the last few games have been 8 o'clock kickoffs, and I think the West Virginia game was a 7:30 kickoff. So 6:30 is late. It's unfortunate. You'd like to have it as a noon game instead of these nighttime games, but at least it's better than 8 o'clock. 6:30 game at home. I imagine we'll probably start the post-game show around 11 or 12. I'll let you know as we get a little bit closer to that, but you want to be a part of it, though. You don't want to miss the post-game shows. There are always a lot of I say fun in the sense that there's always a lot of people gathering together to talk about the game and have those conversations. And so that part of it is fun, even if the last 4 weeks, the post-game show has not exactly been filled with warm and fuzzies. But we'll be back at it on the live post-game show, the Panther-Lair post-game, after the Louisville game in 2 weeks. Again, 6:30 kickoff at Acrisure Stadium for that homecoming game. Now, I said at the beginning, there's a lot of changes that could be made. Only some of them are realistically going to be made, and I think we know the biggest one that is, possible/probable or even likely to be made. The biggest possible change that Pat Narduzzi could make right now to try to salvage this season and change the course of the season is the change that I think we all know he's not going to make, and that's changing the offensive coordinator. It's not going to happen at midseason. Narduzzi has never done that, despite his frustrations. He's never done it. I quite frankly, I just could not see him making a change at midseason, and I'm not sure how much it changes if you make that change at midseason. If you remove the offensive coordinator, if you send Frank Cignetti packing, you're turning the keys over to Tim Salem, Taekwon Underwood, Andre. I don't know who you're turning it over to. That you say, okay, yeah, let's let that guy get his shot. And that's no disrespect to Salem, who we've seen in that role a couple of times, or Underwood, who I think holds the title of pass game coordinator or something like that. I'm sure that means something to his day-to-day responsibilities, but it doesn't carry a lot of water with those of us on the outside. It doesn't really mean much to us. So I don't really see that move getting made. I think that gets reevaluated at the end of the season, and I'm sure Narduzzi will have decisions to make in that regard. The biggest change that is possible, maybe probable, maybe even likely, of course, is the change at quarterback. And I'm a broken record about personnel things. I always say it that I don't like going too hard on questioning personnel. I don't like going too hard. You got to bench this guy. You got to play that guy. Because quite frankly, I hear people say it all the time. I mean, yes, about Pitt, but also look at the Steelers. Look at all the Steelers discourse right now. You got to do this. You got to do that. I mean, you guys don't know. What are you talking about? You're not at practice. You're not in the film sessions. You're not reviewing the film with the level of detail that the coaches are. And this doesn't mean that I defer to the coaches on everything. I think sometimes they make bad decisions. I think sometimes we realize it in retrospect that they made a bad decision. I think sometimes there are obvious calls. You should be getting the ball to this guy. You should be playing that guy. But 95% of the time, I do defer to the coaches because I just feel like they're coming into it with more information, more data, more research, and they have a lot more on the line, right? Coaches don't usually want to lose. They're usually going to make the decision they feel give the team the chance to win because their jobs are relying on the team winning. But in this case, I'm going to break from that sort of standard approach. And this isn't some crazy news or crazy development. This is not a hot take. I mean, these shows are never about hot takes. It never has been, and it probably never will be. I just don't know if I have the stomach for it, and I don't think I have the nerve for it. I mean, my good faith predictions are bad enough. I don't need to go make crazy, hot takes. That's just not what this program is about. That's not what these videos are about. And so, I say this with the most rational mind that I can possibly conjure up. I mean, change the quarterback. Change the quarterback. It's the most realistic option for change that you have if you're Pat Narduzzi. And it's the one that has the potential to impact things the most. I could sit here and say, man, why don't they give Derek Davis a chance at running back? Or, man, they got to throw to Gavin Bartholomew. Or, obviously, Konate Mumford. Or, they got to get Kenny Johnson more involved. Or, let's try one of the freshman running backs. All those guys. I can sit here and say those things, but nothing is going to have as big of an impact as the quarterback position. And nothing is going to impact this offense, and by extension, this team, as much as changing the quarterback. Now, I'm all for the coaches playing the players who they feel give them the best chance to win. But guess what? You're not winning. You're not winning. You've lost 4 games in a row, and you've looked increasingly bad in every single one of them. Arguably, you've looked worse week by week with a brief blip of something approaching efficiency in the first half against North Carolina. The team isn't winning. So I don't think, the policy of going with the guy who gives you the best chance to win, it doesn't really carry a lot of water here because you're not winning. So going with the guy who seems to give you the best chance to win isn't working. And I think with Phil Dracovic, and nothing that I'm going to say here is personal with him. Seems like a nice guy. He's obviously been around for a while. I think he's got football talent, but the thing is that you would hear different things out of training camp. And I talked a bunch of times about accuracy, concerns about accuracy. People would bring up the videos that Pitt would put out. Pitt would release videos where some of the passes you say, that's a great catch, but I don't know about that throw. And what I heard was there was a belief that once he got into the games, he would elevate his level of play. That Phil Dracovic would be a gamer, right? You always have those gamers. They don't practice well, but when they get into games, they get under the lights and they just turn up the level of play. Well, that hasn't happened. That hasn't happened. If all I can imagine that is that he's just about as bad in practice as he has been in the games this season. Because God forbid if he's been worse in practice than he's been in games. If that's the case, then I say, why are you rolling him out here? I'm going to give the coaches the benefit of the doubt and assume that he's not any worse in practice than he's been in games and that they were just sort of counting on him stepping up and playing at a higher level once, he's actually in the games and the lights come on. But that hasn't happened. He hasn't played at a higher level. He hasn't elevated his play, and he's been not the only detriment to the team, but he's been a detriment to the team. He's been a detriment to the offense, and the offense as a whole has been a detriment to the team's success. This is not to let the defense off the hook for North Carolina or the Virginia Tech game or how they defended Cincinnati in the first half. I'm not letting the defense off the hook here, but right now, those guys on defense are probably feeling like if we don't pitch a shutout, we lose. And that's a lot of pressure to put on that side of the ball, where you do have a lot of new starters. You have a lot of young players and inexperienced players contributing. And I think they're, going to get better. I still have some faith in that side of the ball improving over the course of the season. But it's a lot of pressure to put on them that basically if you give up more than like 2 touchdowns, you're going to lose because your offense can't score. They can't score enough to make that up. And they haven't scored enough. They've scored 7 offensive touchdowns in 4 games against FBS teams. So you're not getting it out of the offense, and you're not getting it out of Phil Dracovic. Christian Veilleux, Nate Yarnell may or may not be worse than Phil Dracovic. But I know this. Like, I don't know. I don't know if they're worse or not, but I know this. They've lost 4 in a row with Jurkovec. They can lose 4 in a row with Veer and Yarnell. And I think they need to. I don't think they need to lose 4 in a row, but I think they need to find out what those guys can do. And this is something I always push back against too. I hate this notion. I think coaches hate this notion. I don't think coaches think this way for the most part, particularly not at the quarterback situation or at the quarterback position. I try not to think this way because I think there are a lot of flaws in this logic. But the reality is, you need to find out about Veer and Yarnell. You got to find out. Pass protection issues aside, receivers, run game, all those other issues, I understand them. But you need to find out what those guys can do. Because what we saw from Christian Veer in the second half against North Carolina is who he is, then he's not the long-term future. He's not going to help you in 2024, if that's who he is. And I don't know if that's who he is. Didn't exactly hear glowing reviews about him in practice either, but maybe when he gets a full game, a full week to prepare as the starter, and he plays a full game, and he's got the full game plan and all that stuff, maybe he plays at a higher level than he played in the second half of that North Carolina game. But if that's how he's going to play, then you need to find out about it. You need to find out if that's who he is, because if that's who he is, then he's no longer your plan for 2024. He was the plan. The plan was Phil Jurkovec in 23, Christian Veer in 24 and 25, and they're just going to be set for like 3 years of quarterback and really roll into that next era or whatever. Well, that plan is off if Veer goes out there and isn't good. Right? I mean, if Veer cannot play at a higher level than he showed in that North Carolina game, then he's not the future anymore. And you got to find that out about Nate Yarnell too. And I'm not saying, you just got to give these guys a one-game audition, but you do need to get them on the field, and you do need to have them play. Excuse me. Sorry. No disrespect to Phil Jurkovec. And I don't want to be rude or crass about this, but the reality is there's nothing gained from playing him any longer. It's just the truth. Unless he's all of a sudden going to make a huge uptick in the level of his play and complete like 6 or 7 passes in the first half of a game, which, right, he's done like once all season. Unless there's going to be some great improvement here for the final 7 games, there's nothing to be gained from playing him. You are losing with him, you can lose without him, and you can gain valuable information for the future. You do need to know if Veer and or Yarnell are going to be part of your future, and you need to find it out now. You can't wait until the spring. You can't wait until next season to find out whether or not those guys are the future, because if they're not, you need to be as aggressive as you have ever been in the offseason going to the portal for a quarterback. And I know you don't want to hear that. I switched my use of second-person pronouns. I was addressing the football team and the football program and the coaches. Now I'm addressing you as the fans. You don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear about more portal quarterbacks. You don't want to hear about more transfers. It didn't work with Keaton Slovis, but maybe there was a reason for that. It hasn't worked with Phil Jurkovec. There might be a reason for that. And you don't want any more transfers. You're done with transfers. It's time to homegrow them. And that's great. You should homegrow them. And you're going to homegrow them with I don't even know. Do people use homegrow like a verb like I was just doing? You're going to do that. You're going to ideally do that with Julian Duggar coming in next year. You're going to develop him over the course of a couple years. And maybe when he's a sophomore or a redshirt sophomore, he's going to be ready to step in and lead for 2 or 3 years or whatever, a redshirt freshman, something. Great. That's a great plan. And you should work on that. And you should grow your own quarterbacks and develop them over a period of years. And then you've got these homegrown guys that can lead your program. That's all well and good. But that's a plan for like 2026. All right, Ty Diefenbach, I don't think is going to be ready to lead your team in 2024. I don't. I don't know about 2025. But in 2024, which becomes more and more crucial of a season, more and more dire of a season with every passing game, every time they lose a game, every time they get blown out, every time they slip further and further, 2024 becomes even more and more pressure-packed. Ty Diefenbach's not going to be your option next year. I'm fairly confident about that. So you need to find out if Christian Veer or Nate Yarnell are. And I hate to say that you're using games as proving grounds or games as sort of a test to find out. You hate to go into the Louisville game and say, well, I don't know if we're going to win or lose, but we need to gather valuable information about Christian Veer and Nate Yarnell. Like, I hate that. You should try to win the games. But I think part of that is finding out whether one of those guys or both can win the games for you. I think you have to do it. You have to do it. One, and I mean, it's not just about the future. I mean, I'm talking a lot about, you got to find out about those guys. You got to get ready for the future. You got to find out if they're going to lead you in 24 and 25. It's not just about that. It's also the reality of the situation that you're 1-4, you're in a 4-game losing streak, and your quarterback completed 5 passes before in the first 54 minutes of the game on Saturday. That your quarterback threw 3 interceptions in the game at West Virginia. That your quarterback hasn't really played winning football at all for you. And again, I'm not making it personal with Phil Dracovic, but they're losing with him. They can lose without him, and in the process, they can gain a little bit of information about some of these other guys. And maybe a different quarterback comes in there and has a little more success. We see it at NC State. They benched Brennan Armstrong. Said, transfer quarterback, we like you, Brennan, but you're just not playing well enough. So we're going to go with our redshirt. I think he's a redshirt freshman or a true sophomore, whatever he is, MJ Morris. 4-star guy, signed with NC State last year, and they're going with him. He's going to be their quarterback. They're switching over to him. They want to give their offense a spark. I don't know if they or Yarnell will give this offense a spark, but it's somebody different out there who can, we'll see. We'll see what they can do. And I'm going against things that I have argued about for years, that I've pushed back against for years. But that's where Pitt is right now. You just don't gain anything from going with the same guy anymore. He's done after this year no matter what. And as this season continues to descend, next year becomes even more important. You need to find out how aggressive you need to be in the transfer portal. And I don't think you can just base it on what Yarnell has done in practice or what Veyer has done in practice. I think they need to play in games, and I think you need to find out now. You need to know by the time you get to December 1st how hard you're going to go after somebody. You probably, if you're going to change offensive coordinators, if that comes to pass, you'd probably like to have that guy involved with finding the quarterback. I think that's plausible, and maybe there was a bit of an issue with that last year with Frank Cignetti and Keaton Slovis. Maybe Cignetti wouldn't have pursued Slovis. Maybe Slovis wouldn't have come here with Cignetti. And so you do have to sort of manage that. You probably should try to have something lined up. If you're going to make a change, I don't think you wait until January 7th to do it, because you need to be aggressive in that quarterback market if you need to be. If you determine, no, it's not going to work. Vayer's not going to work. Yarnell's not going to work. If that's what you determine, then you need to go hard, because it might be I don't want to get into hyperbole about what's riding on, the next quarterback transfer, the next OC hire, if those two things end up happening this offseason, but there's a whole lot riding on it. And I think we all know there's a whole lot riding on it. I think you have to do it. I don't think you can go with Phil Dracovic any longer. It was a nice idea. It would have been great if it worked out. And I don't think I ever expected it to be pretty. I never expected it to be that, he was going to, lead the country in efficiency. I thought, Dracovic, he's at his best when he's, shaking off a tackle, rolling out and throwing it 50 yards downfield. And that's great. I thought it would be that. And I thought it could work. It hasn't. For a lot of reasons. And obviously it's not all on the quarterback, though. Pass protection, receivers, all those different things. That's fine. The quarterback is still bailing out of clean pockets. He's throwing it into the ground. He's missing receivers. He's missing open receivers. He's either not seeing guys, or when he throws to an open receiver, he's just missing them. It's something has to give. And something has to change. And if you make the change and it doesn't work out, then it didn't work out. And maybe you try something else. But at least you tried, and you found out a little bit about next year. Found out about what you need to do heading into next year, and where you need to be, and where your attention needs to be, and where your efforts need to be. So there's a lot of changes that could be made. This is probably the one that could have the biggest impact of the realistic changes. Nobody's getting fired at midseason, I don't think. Nobody's getting fired at midseason. It's this is the move that probably needs to be made. And we'll see what Pat Narduzzi says next Monday. He didn't have a weekly press conference this week because they typically don't have the weekly press conferences during the off week. Coaches go on the road recruiting and that kind of thing. So They didn't have that yesterday, but Narduzzi will have his next press briefing on Monday, and we'll ask him, you changing quarterbacks. What's the move there? And if he says no, Phil's our guy, we say, well, what's the rationale for sticking with him? What do you gain with him over trying one of the other guys? We'll see. I think I'm preaching the choir here. I think you guys probably all were thinking this, just as well as I was, but I figured we could talk about it here on the Morning Pitt, give you a little break from the Steelers and Kenny Pickett talk for a little bit of Pitt conversation, diving deep onto some of these topics. We'll have more Pitt stuff to talk about all week for sure on the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll have our live Panther-Lair show tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett will hang out for an hour talking a little Pitt sports, so we look forward to that. And then we will, we'll just keep motoring along with the Morning Pitt. A little bit of basketball stuff coming up, and anything we can find to talk about, we'll keep it interesting for you for sure. Make sure you check out the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and like this video and subscribe. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for tuning in today. Hope your week got off to a great start yesterday, and hope today's another good one. It's a beautiful week. It's terrible for football. Terrible football in Pittsburgh, but beautiful weather. So enjoy it, and we will catch up with you tomorrow on the Morning Pitt right here. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.